Representation is very important. I'm so happy. I'm so thankful that Bianca Belair and Naomi, Jade Cargill, that they exist. I got to talk to Jade for the first time since she joined the WWE at Media Day, and to look her in the face and tell her, hey, I have a niece, a black girl who loves wrestling, who lives in Harlem, who's in New York, who's 8 years old, who now has these real life superheroes, not at the movies, but on the screen every Friday night.
Welcome to another episode of the PGTK Podcast, an interview podcast. My name is Emmanuel, and first of all, I do want to preface this episode that there were some technical issues during the recording portion of this episode, so there will be some edits that are going to be done, as well as having a audio-only captions and podcast logo portion of this episode. So I want to be transparent and be upfront with you before we start this episode with Adrian Hernandez, and we talk about his experiences during WrestleMania weekend this past weekend, and we'll talk about more how he got into starting into wrestling media. And you can like, comment, and subscribe, or if you are on Spotify, follow this podcast and leave a 5-star rating. And without further ado, here is our conversation with Adrian Hernandez. From his apartment, we have Adrian Hernandez in our midst today, right off to a flying start. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm exhausted, but I'm the best kind of exhausted after a wonderful week, after our Super Bowl, after WrestleMania. Pardon my voice. I sound a little bit under the weather. Sleep deprived this week, but again, not going to complain because it was all for greatness and a great time. So thank you for having me and glad to be here. Yes, live from the airport directly to my apartment, pulling out my microphone to make sure I could be here to do this, man.
Thank you so much for having you on. And of course, WrestleMania is already come and gone. And I want to talk about, especially on your media day, and the big news that's circulating that Friday was that scrap between LA Knight and AJ Styles. Now, from your point of view, what the heck happened?
All right, so first off, it was cool, and I was kind of eager to see how much media would be there. Obviously, I mean, it's WrestleMania, right? But with it being the 40th, with it being in Philadelphia, so close to New York, and some of those bigger markets, and then the Hollywood effect, I'll call it, whether it's Logan Paul or The Rock, and trying to see what it was. And honestly, it was on par, if not more. I actually believe it was more media that was there covering it than LA, which is crazy because LA is the media capital, entertainment capital of this country, basically the world. And we had a much smaller room. It was super tiny. So,
wow.
How do I explain this? So, basically, there was eight. What are we gonna call them? 8 pods, 8 different lines. You lined up to talk to the talent, and they kind of circulated them out every hour or so to bring out as many people as they could. WWE roster and NXT roster, of course, to talk about stand and deliver. So I was in line to talk to AJ Styles, and next to him was Roxanne Perez. So I talked to AJ Styles, and then I talked to Roxanne Perez. Somehow during the exchange between me going from AJ to Roxanne, LA Knight came in and was slotted next to AJ, probably about 10 feet. Everyone was 10 feet from each other, to a side. And shout out to Phil Lindsay, who does a fantastic job hosting Grapsody. And also he writes for Bleacher Report, does some things for Fansided. He's fantastic. And he was interviewing Carmelo Hayes behind us. And when I finished talking to Roxanne and he posted this video, within 10 seconds of me going from one side to the other, AJ and LA start to scrap. And the craziest thing was, this was all very quick. We on the other side had thought, oh crap, someone dropped their camera, because we heard a thud. Like at a restaurant when someone drops a glass. We're like, oh, that sucks. That's someone's camera or their lights or something happened. And then 5 seconds later, whoop, there goes LA Knight being thrown into this wall of this hotel. And it did leave a dent. You could see I'll give out my links later. Like I have the videos, like the dent was there, and they start scrapping, and yeah, and it was funny. I kind of got upset, and I was disappointed in myself. I didn't yell out "World Star" when I should have. There was no police, nobody really interfered. We all just brought out our phones to try to see this scrap. But basically, they were next to each other, and then they finally said something. They said something to each other, and LA Knight was like, "You know what? You want to go?" And then they did it. They broke a chair. Apparently on Sunday in the Countdown show, which I haven't watched, I'm in there. You can see me. I'm not smiling at the camera, but you can see me. Because it was literally right behind us. If we would have stayed to talk for someone for like 20 seconds, we would have had to move the hell out the way. But it was super fascinating, and I also thought it was really cool from a buzz perspective to be able to do that. WWE cameras were not there. How do I say this? They may have had camera people there with like smaller cameras with them, just not a full production team with the big ass 4K camera that you have to rest on your shoulder with a dude carrying the wires and everything. Like, no, it wasn't that. It was just the media. And I thought that was smart because obviously everyone immediately went on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. I posted my clip. That thing has 5 million views on Facebook.
Wow.
Like it's nuts. And it generates an organic buzz. And I think it speaks to the hunger and the creativeness of not only AJ Styles, who's done some creative things at WrestleMania. When you think back at his match with Shane McMahon, you think back at the moment with the Undertaker and how they had to make that theatrical, and then just LA Knight doing whatever he can to make a name for himself, because obviously with it being his first WrestleMania match. So they end up breaking a chair. They break the chair. They scrap. AJ really threw him down on this hard ass concrete with like the super thin carpet. I was like, God damn, bro. Like that's like, you guys need to chill out and make sure you guys can make it to the ring. And it was funny because people were like, this is the stupidest fight. I was like, well, it really wasn't like they weren't fisticuffs. Like they were over here really amateur wrestling, fighting, trying to put each other in holds.
Yeah.
And somewhere within that, AJ busted his nose. I don't think he broke it, but he busted it. He was bleeding.
Yes.
And the worst part about it is number one, thankfully I was one of the first people to talk to AJ Styles. Because obviously after that scrap, they both left, and there was about 50 people waiting to talk to LA Knight. And LA Knight really came there and talked to 2 people, was there for like 10 minutes, and then said, hey, let's do this. And then that incident happened. So I felt really bad for the people that were waiting to talk to both of them, but especially LA Knight, because there was a whole bunch of people waiting to talk to him, and he really just came in to do what he did. And I thought it was super, super smart. Danny Garcia in boxing had done something, and excuse my ignorance, I don't remember who the other team was, but they tried to replicate or do something similar at Super Bowl Media Day, except they did it at Friday at 4 p.m., which meant that there was no one there. The only people that were there were the construction workers breaking down all the broadcast setups for like ESPN and all these huge media properties. They had all left because the weekend was here. Like they should have done it Tuesday morning when there's millions of media everywhere, and they had a full-on brawl. And it was like, oh, this is what they tried to do, but they did it like uniquely. They did it smart. So shout out to AJ in LA, and sorry for the people that didn't get to talk to LA because he just really wanted to go in there and fight. But I thought it was fascinating, and they haven't done anything like that before. If I recall, sorry, I just real quick, I want to say I recall an NXT, one of the pay-per-views earlier last year, there was a Comic-Con in Texas, and they had they did something similar. Like it was pre-recorded and it was similar, but it wasn't to the effect and to the rawness of like, nope, we're not bringing our cameras. Whatever we get from people who recorded it, that's what we're going to get. And you see the results because it went viral.
Yeah, it's interesting because especially when we're seeing a lot of how marketing is done, especially with something that blurs the lines. And it's funny how when we're going to talk about the actual WrestleMania nights, where a lot of the lines get blurred very distinctly, but it serves a purpose in what in what they're trying to convey, and especially with that scrap, checking through TikTok, checking through Reels, checking through Twitter. It's amazing how something that can happen on a real life basis actually showed itself on a media day. So like, I'm sure you were shocked at first, but you understood the genius why they did that.
No, 2 seconds in, I was like, "Oh, this is smart as hell." Oh, and then some of the bumps that they took was like, "Oh, this is cool." Like I was just surprised at the AJ essentially lifted him off the ground and then dove him down. He didn't
Ugh.
have his hand on his back, and like this was the concrete. It wasn't. There was no padding. There was none of that. It was there, like in the middle of everyone. It was just fascinating that no one tried to stop him. No refs, no security, no one yelled out World Star, none of that. And then interestingly enough, as I said, talent was being brought in and out, and they were kind of cycling through them. So in one of the cycles, Carmelo Hayes started it off, and then Trick Williams came, and they kept on like in between interviews because they were probably within each other for maybe
Oh, it's
30 or 40
awesome.
minutes. But every time one of them was finished, they just yell something back and forth, and they kind of teased it. Nothing came of it other than those things, but it was just I was like, that's cool and that's smart, and you take advantage of what I just said. The most media they've ever had will give them something to tweet out. Because from comicbook.com to IGN and Bleacher Report and every one of us, me, like if I got 5 million, I can't imagine what these other platforms that have a million times more people. So I was like, yo, this is smart. Again, the presentation is changing in all different ways, not just in what you're watching on TV.
When we're hitting up to WrestleMania and we're seeing all of the build-up that's happening, we're going to recap that, especially on night one. I'm going to share my matches too, but in your eyes, of course, the tag between Seth and Cody and Rock and Roman. Do you think that's the match of the night, or is there anything that's kind of in that realm?
In my opinion, the match of the night was the first one, Rhea versus Becky.
Okay.
I loved it. I have a massive amount of respect for Rhea Ripley, because of last year with her and Charlotte. And as this year's gone by, kind of some of the backstory about that match, or a few weeks ago, we heard Charlotte like not listen to the referees or anybody and go overtime, because she believed in the match. And the reason I loved it so much is within 3 minutes of that match starting, I could immediately tell they had chips on their shoulders. I don't think they appreciated not having as much time to tell this story leading up because they were on SmackDown. It's a 2-hour show, yada, yada, yada. It happens every year. But them to manifest that into the match that they had and for them to show out and have an absolute classic, in my opinion. And I kind of felt not the greatness of both just doing what they love to do on the biggest stage, and they performed and they executed. It was a slow build, but these past couple weeks and Becky kind of being like, "Hey, you're attractive and you're showing your ass, and this is exactly what I fought against to show that we could do what we do in the ring."
Right.
And the presentation, Rhea getting the live theme song, Becky coming out with the book. You know, it's ominous with the book and the video package that they played as she was coming out. Like, yo, if this is the end, I don't think it is, but it was like it was all very well put together, and I thought it was a banger. And it also was at the beginning of the night, and I wasn't freezing my ass off completely like I was 4 hours later after a 45-minute tag match. So Becky and Rhea was kind of my match of the night one.
Yeah, mine, as much as the main event has having so much buzz, I gotta give credit to Sammy and Gunther for the Intercontinental title. And part of the reason why I enjoyed that match so much is props to Gunther, first of all, for reigning the Intercontinental title, which is a very nice number of 666 days, which is very apropos to what he does in the ring. But I gotta give even more credit to Sammy, because what happened last year was it last year when he was trying to get the title from Roman in his last year,
leading up to WrestleMania. Yep.
Okay, understood. That main event last year, especially in his hometown, it felt kind of bleak, but I always compare Roman title defenses to what Ric Flair does, and there will probably be a run-in, and Solo showed up, lo and behold, and he didn't get the title out of that. But this match with it's a literal David and Goliath story, and seeing where Sammy has gone, and I love the build-up, bringing up Chad Gable being in that picture, because he faced Gunther. For me, honestly, that was my match of the year, was Gunther and Chad Gable. So seeing that whole Rocky aspect, and of course being in Philadelphia, seeing that trainer like, hey, I want you to push as hard as you can, and seeing that payoff with what Sammy did. And when I heard and knew, and I was tearing up, because like Sammy has gone through a lot in his career with the WWE, and being the guy who's the mantle in the intercontinental game, that's something that's being such a payoff for him. So but I do want to give Gunther the credit, because yes, he did beat Honky Tonk for that reign as intercontinental title, and he's very much a dominant force, and I'm sure he's going to take a long break running through that run of 666 days. So that was my match of the year. So what do you think of that match too?
I thought it was incredible. I again, back to the presentation, it was so cool, especially because then we saw it play out for both nights. But you brought up Chad Gable kind of giving them the speech, but then they followed the long walk out the stage, and the extra long walk because it's WrestleMania. And of course, you see Kevin Owens say something to him, and it kind of pays off from that moment from the Royal Rumble last year, where he got away from the bloodline, leading to the Elimination Chamber. And that's why I was kind of like, hold on a second, I get it. Chad Gable's story is amazing, but we're kind of telling that story with Sammy, like we've been telling this story. It's been a little longer, so it hasn't been at the top of our minds throughout this entire, at this point, since Royal Rumble last year, 15 months, 14, 15 months, whatever the case. But the presentation and the underdog feel, and Kevin Owens and coming out in the crowd, and his wife and his kids being out there, and also some absolute, I don't know what I can say on this show, so I'm just gonna say dweebs being like Botchamania when he did the brain buster. Like I got out of my seat because I was like, oh crap, he did it, let's go. And it was incredible, and it was dope. And it also, the decision to make that happen kind of just added more thoughts in people's heads about, well, what's gonna happen for the rest of this weekend, because people automatically kind of say, hey, okay, one underdog won in Sammy. That must mean that Cody's not going to win, because they're not going to do this story twice. Or now he's definitely going to lose because Sammy won. So the match itself was excellent. I'm going to be honest with you. Night one, I need to watch the television broadcast for both nights. But night one especially, because even in the press box with AC and the heat on, man, it was cold, bro. So, like, for people, like, my focus wasn't necessarily on the match 100%. It was making sure that my body was warm. And also, for people complaining about the crowd being whack and this and that, and why they being so quiet, man, shut up. You know how pissed off I'd be? And I know the prices of those tickets to be in there, no matter you were in the cheap seats in that football stadium or down on the floor, it was expensive. And to be paying that much money, to be freezing your ass off, tough night. And that was the third to last match, the second to last match.
I can't remember.
Yeah, so I definitely need to go see that back. It was amazing for him to pull out some of his moves. It's crazy that Sammy has like 10 more that he's never used in his WWE career, and he's been here a minute. It's crazy. But you know, shout out to both of them. Sammy gets another incredible moment, and Gunther has an incredible run as he, you know, hopefully steps into the main title picture, and we'll see what happens in this leading up to Bash in Berlin, which I think everyone's expecting him to fight for either the heavyweight or the undisputed title.
Right, and we're gonna move on to which match has the potential to steal the show on night one. What would be that match for you?
Great question. The multi-team tag match was night one, correct?
Which one is that?
The ladder match. The ladder match was night one, correct?
Yes.
That's
yeah.
the show stealer. That was a show stealer. I mean, it's a given because the violence that's involved. But I think that the another underdog story to see R-Truth finally win was like a
Right.
cool thing. A lot of people were like, "Yeah, man, this is dope." You can laugh, but it's true. Like a lot of people
That's
love
why.
R-Truth. A lot of people love R-Truth, and I would have said Jade and Bianca, but I don't think it had so much expectations and it lived up to them. I don't think it was like a thing where like people were like, "Oh snap!" Like it was like, no, we want to see these three women, real life superhero Justice League Avengers, coming out here and looking like Mortal Kombat people, and it was incredible to see. But I think that ladder match definitely stole the show. It built some suspense too with Theory and Waller winning there at the beginning. So I think they did their thing. I think that stole the show.
Mine was the Jimmy and Jay, honestly, and part of why I thought this was gonna. I mean, I think it would have stolen the show. Part of it was the just how the bloodline story is becoming unglued rather gradually, especially when night one, with night one being underway, and seeing and that meant and the storytelling in the match was amazing when Jimmy's like, "Hey, all right, I'm gonna look you out," and then suddenly he does this swerve on it. I was like, "Oh, okay, so he's gonna be part of the bloodline. He's gonna be, he's gonna be the one trying to get away from that match and get that win." And seeing how Jimmy and Jay being in the tag team conversation and doing singles work is something that's been writing on the walls for a while, and seeing how where they're at now doing their singles run with what they're going through within not only like their own story but within the bigger picture of the bloodline. That one, I honestly, like, if the cards were played right, that would have been a main event match if it needed to, especially with night one. So that's my show stealer, because I'm like, the amount of work that they have between Jimmy and Jay has been just amazing. And I was listening to Bully Ray on Busted Open, where like he was pitching them to, hey, give Jimmy and Jay this run on the tag match, on the tag teams within WWE. And now we're seeing them doing their own runs within the singles division too. So it's nice to see that.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of people were disappointed with that match.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I heard online. Again, I'm
Okay.
reserving judgment. I'm reserving judgment on night one because it seems like it was 50 days ago. And I need to go back. I will say, for some other reasons, like I was upset. Lil Wayne came out and apparently his set was completely cut down. He did 40 seconds of one song. He was supposed to do 5 songs. He was supposed to be like a mini concert leading up to Wayne, but they wanted the main event. They wanted the tag team match to be a little bit longer. So I was like, okay, we didn't get it. It threw me off. I was like, why did Wayne just spit out a 30-second? What is this? Like, you guys had him on Raw last week. You don't usually do that for any musical people. So, you're expecting, like, we've had Flow Rider and some of these other, they've sung like 1 or 2, 3 songs, and Wayne gets 30 seconds. That's weird. And some of the pacing, just, I don't know, man. I chalk it up to this weather, man. And I'm not saying it was snowing or anything, but it just something felt off. And also, in WrestleMania, there's always these stories I just said about Rhea and Charlotte not being able to tell that story to their fullest abilities. And I think Jimmy and Jay didn't really get to focus on some of the intricacies and some of the things that you're right. It could have main evented. It could have opened. I wanted to see Hell in the Cell. I could have seen some really a lot of hatred and a lot of violence.
Right.
Like the possibilities were endless. And for us to get a 15-minute, 20-minute match, it was kind of odd. Jay being like, hey, don't hurt me. I'm gonna shake my hand, and then I'm gonna just immediately try to super kick you.
Yeah.
Like I think some of those things in that match were kind of predictable when it could have been full on chaos, and it could have really been the greatest brother versus brother match when it really felt like Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy
That's right.
But I will say, not to jump ahead, they redeemed themselves with what they did later on night 2, which is like the underrated spot that no one's talking about. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I was gonna rate the entire night, but from what you've seen with that tag match in night 1, did it finally live up to the hype with all the build up, within all the SmackDowns and Raws and all of that? Did that tag match live up to the hype, in your opinion?
It's a great question. It was great. I'll leave it at that. It wasn't the greatest thing or greatest tag team match of all time, blah, 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 blah. I thought that they were in a tough situation. I thought it was odd that they let them go that long, because the reason you're in a tough situation is you want to make sure everyone is healthy to do what they need to do the next night, including The Rock, who's had some injuries the last time he's been in the ring. So I thought it was smart that they went outside and did some of that stuff to kind of prevent some of those things from happening. But then I was like, well, why did y'all just not make this a quicker match? The spear on Roman, or the Roman spear on The Rock, like everyone in the crowd was freaking out. The fact that everyone kind of stayed with their allegiances, and we got the moment almost identical with Cody sitting in the ring looking despondent with his family there. I thought they got the job done. I would have, instead of being like the second longest main event in WrestleMania history, I would have cut that down tremendously to let Lil Wayne get an extra song in, or let Jimmy and Jay wrestle for 5 more minutes or something. You know what I mean? So I was like, the Tetris of how you guys, or the pie chart was a little bit off, but they did what they needed to do. And there was a moment too that was like, yo, finally we're here. It had a lot of expectations and a lot of hype. So that big fight feel was there at the end, and some of those moments and some of the dynamics, and I was blessed to be able to be in the press box, to hear the television, to know exactly what The Rock was doing.
Part of the match, I refer to Monty Python and the Holy Grail when this happens, where there's a scene where they're one of the characters. I have to see one of the nights, and he met this nurse, and they're having this sexual tension, and suddenly you hear the crowd saying, "Get on with it!" And that was my exact mindset when those spots tap, and it's like, just get on with it. Like, are you just gonna sit there? And I'm watching the broadcast, so of course. Michael Cole and the commentary team were doing their part, but it was just like, they're just sitting there for 2 minutes, and it's like, okay, are we gonna start moving? All right, so with the events and the matches that are happening in night 1, and I'm gonna try this rating. How many stories out of 5 is night 1 to you?
I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 stories.
Okay,
I'll go 4 out of 5 stories. I think there was moments.
I'm gonna go with 4 out of 5. I always had this thought whenever there's a night 1 in WrestleMania, since they implemented it. It's just an appetizer to something bigger, and that's like, to have a 5 out of 5 night 1, like, and I'm gonna throw the Meltzer system. There better be a 6 out of 5 in night 2. We're moving on to night 2, and night 2 has had a lot of spectacle and fanfare that we finally got to see in night 2. And of course, the main event with Roman and with Cody for the undisputed title, and it's in Bloodline rules. Now, is that the match of the year, or do you have anything else that you think that is that match of the year for night 2?
I mean, that's a tough question to ask me. Is that a match that everyone in that stadium will ever forget? No. Hell no. Hell no. Epic. And it's so damn cool, because you always see some of these SmackDown and these Raw endings from the 90s, where Kurt Angle comes out, and then Chris Jericho, and then Rob Van Dam, and then Booker T, then Kane, then Undertaker, then Triple H, then Stone Cold, and then The Rock, and star after star after star after star. But I haven't played many of the WWE 2Ks, but that ending felt like one of the storyline endings of one of those video games where, and the best part is that we knew it. We knew that the
Right.
Cody Avengers were assembling. It has been plotted. It has been discussed ad nauseum, and everyone's like, "Is Rock, Cena, Austin? Who's gonna show up?" And even without Stone Cold, they lived up to the hype of making this incredible. Earlier, we talked about Jimmy and Jay being a disappointing match from what I saw, and I'm kind of leaning that way. I know that you were a fan of it, but that moment that no one's talking about where he just dives off of the stage, spears him through the table, going off the ramp of the WrestleMania ramp, I was like, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Cena coming out, doing what he needs to do with Solo, them getting the timing right with the camera, looking at Cena, and from a distance when the Rock's music plays, the Undertaker coming out, that damn gong, man, that thing always
Yes.
I saw it on TV and it looked amazing. I promise you, everyone, the energy when he came out. It's why we do
Unreal.
this, man. It's why we do this. I can't put it into words. I can't be poetic enough. I get paid to talk on the microphone, believe it or not, and I still can't put it into words like how special and how cool that was to see. And for them to nail this cluster F of an end game type finish with all these different elements, and for them to do it the way that they did, and kind of the aftermath of seeing Roman and Paul Heyman hug at the ramp as Cody celebrates. And excuse me, and I wasn't even aware because we were being brought down for the press conference. I was not aware. I did not see all the faces come out and kind of celebrate with Cody, which harkens back to 1981 with Dusty and everyone coming out when he won the title. Like it got so many people emotional. That real life story, to see that story finish, it was really, really special. So when you ask me if it's match of the year, I think that there's not going to be a match this year that is going to touch some of the emotional heartstrings, even with Sting retiring earlier this year and the emotions of that with a legendary career finishing up. Like it was a culmination of things, man. And even now in the aftermath of like, yo, Roman's run, I'm so happy that Cody said it in his press conference, but Roman's run was spectacular. This story from a bloodline only perspective was spectacular. And you add Cody, then you add the element of The Rock, and The Rock coming to do something that, you know, for the I love wrestling a lot because of The Rock. But there was, as I grew up, I kind of, people that I didn't respect as much while they were doing it, like a John Cena, I was like, no, The Rock's better, The Rock's better. But I was like, you know what? The Rock really wasn't here that much. And when you look at these runs from 95 to 01 or 02, and he left to go do Scorpion King, like he doesn't have the longevity of dudes like Cena. But when you see The Rock come back and do the things that he did as a heel, as a final boss, I was like, there's a lot of goats. Hulk Hogan tried to do that with the NWO when they freaking ran over The Rock in the semi-truck and did all these things. That didn't hit the way that The Rock did it with this run. And the awkwardness and the chaos of him involving himself into that in the aftermath and what happened, it really did truly elevate everything. So when it comes to the emotional heartstrings, it is definitely match of the year. In terms of ring work and things like that, there's going to be a match between Will Ospreay and Daniel Bryan that I think will probably be the match of the year, or Swerve and Will Ospreay at All In, or whatever. There's a whole bunch of that's probably going to be there because wrestling is cool again and everyone's swinging for the fences. But when it comes to that emotional, tying in all of that, it has to be the main event. It has to.
Exactly. I was a skeptic with the main event in night 2 because part of it, and I've been thinking about it in terms of how the how Roman might chase Hogan. That was, that was probably in the cards somewhere, especially with what he's reading. Of course, now we got to see Roman beat Hulk in main event appearances, which is still a record on its own because not a lot of wrestlers will get to that level of Hogan for a while. But as I got to understand Cody since he departed AEW to do his thing in WWE, I'm sold. The story has been such, it's a trope, honestly. It's a trope that we've seen a lot in terms of how we view stories, and the story, and especially the payoff, having that moment when Cody won the title. It's like everyone is rooting for the guy. And again, we're in Philadelphia. Rocky has been such a big thing in Philadelphia, and what better way to have that comeback story than to have Cody. So I am a Cody crybaby. I should have worn my pink robe, but you know what? I have a pink robe in spirit because I understood how Cody progresses in terms of how he's doing in WWE. And in the back of my mind, if Roman wins, what's the point of putting Cody in relevance again? And it harkens back to when Dusty won his title in, I forgot what it was, back in NWA, and he didn't have the same impact when he had the title at the time. And in the back of my mind, like, oh, Cody's gonna do the same thing Dusty's doing, but it defied all expectations, especially with a lot of the setups and the spots that happen. And I swear, I joked around with a friend of mine, and I'm a huge Final Fantasy guy. It's like Undertaker became the Final Fantasy summon, does his job, and leaves. That's how I thought of it when it comes to his spot. So
yeah, some people say the conscience of the WWE, just there to make sure everything, when the path has gone too far right or too far left, he just came, gave a choke slam, and then dipped out. Shout out to him, by the way, because he ran out of that arena with like a whole bunch of security guards. So it's cool to know how much the Undertaker cares.
Yeah, and I kind of find it interesting, especially with Taker. Taker, he still loves the business, regardless of what he's going through. And he knows that moment when he chokeslammed Rock. And I knew at that moment, like, that was a release, a good amount of release for him to say, hey, I'm back in the ring, even if it's only a few seconds. And the crowd was in it. And that was the main thing with that spot, is the crowd lost it. I was yelling in my apartment during the TV broadcast. I'm like, oh, no one's yelling? All right, cool, moving on. And I was just like, I was very giddy at that moment. What was the match that has that potential to steal the show?
Wasn't a match. Stephanie McMahon coming out is what stole the show.
Okay.
Steph coming out, kind of shocking everybody on camera. She was around WWE World, not out there, but she was out there. That makes any sense. She was in the shadows. But she was there. But for her to come out there, for her to say what she said, it being a new era, her return, disappointed in some of my media compadres who didn't follow up on exactly what that meant, because it was reiterated by Triple H saying Stephanie has returned home. What does that mean? In what official capacity? But for her to just come out, period, and say what she said kind of stole the show, because night two was perfect. The weather was good. Everyone was excited. Everyone was sauced up. And honestly, the only thing that I can remember that kind of slowed the pace down is when Snoop Dogg came out to announce the attendance. Everything else kind of flew in. Everything kind of fell in together, even obviously with the Peacock commercials that they have to do and some of the built-in ad spots that they have in between matches. Everything felt good. Logan, Randy, and Kevin, they did great. Io and Bailey, that match was so great.
Yes.
The new entrance with Bailey, we were expecting Paramore, but the fact that they got time and the fact that they put a great match, not only for just Bailey, but Io who has defended that title and done incredible things this past year from the moment she took on Bianca at Backlash in Puerto Rico up until now. So to see them get that stage and to perform so well, that was amazing.
For me, out of all of the other matches, honestly, the Philly street fight was probably the best that I've seen apart from the main event. And as a kid, I would have friends in my school would say, "Get the tables," and seeing Bubba, sorry, I keep calling him Bully, seeing Bubba Ray do that cue, and it's like 1, 2, 3, the whole crowd knew what's gonna happen, and it's seeing that match between the Street Profits and Bobby Lashley and Final Testament, and seeing how that worked out with them. It's been a while since seeing Bully Ray do a lot of ring stuff, even as a referee. And yes, and he is a damn handsome man. And as a referee with stripes, and he admits that it looks ugly on him. Nah, he looks amazing in that referee attire. So that match, I was impressed with the car crash that happened. So, and seeing how that worked out, and that was probably one of the matches. Another one is honestly Bayley and Io too. Like, both of them did a lot of great moments in that match, and seeing Bayley have her WrestleMania moment, and it goes back to night one. Okay, R-Truth's gonna win something. Okay, maybe Asuka. No, that's not gonna work. Oh, Bayley. That was the one that kind of surprised me the most. So the Philly street fight and the women's championship match between Io and Bayley. And I'm gonna, much like night one before, how many stories is night two?
I also completely forgot to mention that Damian Priest cashed in his money in the bank and became World Heavyweight Champion, or the fact that Seth and Drew had a banger and it harkened back to WrestleMania history with with Sheamus and Daniel Bryan, when Sheamus hit the bro kick right after Bryan Danielson, right after he kissed AJ Lee. So there was a lot of cool moments within that match, and then to have that moment when you bring up stories. I told you it was 4 out of 5 for day one. I will go. I'm a big proponent of things not being 5 out of 5s. Things like that being right. Perfect. So I'm gonna give it a 4.5.
Okay. And what was that?
You know what?
Go ahead.
Going up against my rule, 5 out of 5. We'll do it. It's the biggest WrestleMania ever, right? The highest, the most attendance, the most media. It's the second most watched thing on Peacock. All the eyeballs were in it. The celebrity, just the people there, the engagement, the amount of people that have hit me up this past 2 months to be involved in WWE media because they see the things that I'm doing and they see the product, and everyone saying wrestling is cool again. And for them to kind of build that up, and wrestling itself as an industry build that up, and to see them deliver and send everyone home happy, and most of those people not only happy but crying and emotionally invested, and the way it looked and the way it was presented, and Tom Rinaldi and Holly Rowe and all these figures in sports and the presentation, they said it was a new era and they came out swinging. So I'll give them the 5 out of 5.
I'm going to break my rule. I'll go 6 out of 5 for this reason. The story has been such a huge talking point since Cody came on board in WWE. And seeing where the story went and seeing the payoff. And of course, it's expected. And night one was kind of like an indicator that Cody might finish the story. The way that it paid off, especially in the main event. And honestly, and saying that WrestleMania 17 is the greatest Mania, I'm gonna put that as a tie with 17, with WrestleMania 40, and those two are pretty much the way that they're doing things with WrestleMania now, and with Triple H doing his thing post Vince McMahon, and seeing where they're heading. I think WWE's now finally refixed their posture to being being one of the biggest outlets in sports entertainment. So 6 out of 5, dude, just because of the story. So
Fantastic.
there you go. So I am my own Dave Meltzer. That's what it means. So we're gonna pull back a little bit, and of course you have your time being an interviewer and doing stuff on wrestling media. Like, how did that come about?
So it's a great question. I've always wanted to be in the radio. Radio's always been my dream. Sports radio specifically. And I kind of followed that path since I was a little kid. Got into music radio though, hip hop specifically, hip hop radio, which led me here to Las Vegas. And now here in Las Vegas, I'm kind of doing both. I'm in music radio, I'm in sports radio, and if you haven't been paying attention or been sleeping under a rock, Las Vegas has solidified itself as the sports capital of the world within the
Right.
past 2 years with all the professional sports. It always had the boxing, it always had the UFC, but now with the Oakland Athletics coming here in a few years and the NBA coming here in a few years as well, it'll have every sport when it didn't have anything other than boxing. And because of that, obviously Las Vegas has become a center point of the WWE for some events, not just the Super Bowl press conference that they did, but UFC and TKO, and the TNA doing their first welcome back event here to kick off the year in January, and New Japan doing events, and AEW being here Super Bowl weekend as well for Collision, and of course the annual tradition of Double or Nothing. So I'm kind of in a perfect melting pot, and being so close to Los Angeles. And I've always enjoyed wrestling. There was a time period in my childhood, basically when after Eddie Guerrero passed away and kind of the rise of Cena and Edge becoming a bona fide star and things like that, where I was kind of out of the loop. But I got sucked back in with WrestleMania 25 thanks to Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. And the fandom was back and never left. And I always enjoyed the opportunity to talk to wrestlers just because I love it. And selfishly, I have questions that I wanted to know, not necessarily caring about what other people wanted to know. But thankfully for me, some people enjoy that. And I enjoy it too, and I love it. And those experiences, it's a grind and it's very difficult. But it's something that people seem to be liking. And I kind of made the decision to follow this path these past 2 years. I've been very fortunate and very lucky to speak to some of the people that I've spoken to, whether it is Tony Khan or The Undertaker, or Cody Rhodes or Rhea Ripley, Street Profits, just the Bianca Belair, the list goes on and on and on. And it's been a blessing, and kind of just following that path of being like, yo, if I like this and other people seem to like it, let's see what we can make out of this, and try to go for a full circle. So to be able to cover the past 2 WrestleManias, to be at Survivor Series last year, to be in Chicago, to watch wrestling in Chicago, which is something that was like I've always wanted to do, because Money in the Bank, Cena versus Punk is probably my most important wrestling moment, where things got very serious between us. It became a long life affair. So to be able to go to Puerto Rico, my homeland, and see Bad Bunny and see just the passion and the culture. It's been a crazy year to see all these different pops and to see all these moments just within the WWE coverage. But I love wrestling, and I love talking to wrestlers, kind of, just trying to there's an art to conversation. There's an art of conversation, and I'm fascinated by it. And so to be able to get the time to speak with some of the people that I do is pretty awesome, and I'm extremely humbled and fortunate to be able to do this.
Yeah, and we're talking about especially night 2 with Damian Priest, and you had that question about him, about how big of a deal is to have a Puerto Rican champion. What was that feeling when you heard his response, and especially to out all the Puerto Rican audiences who finally saw a champion? What was that feeling like?
I mean, it was a big moment for Latinos. It was a big moment in wrestling, period. It was a Money in the Bank cash in, one of the best things. Shout out to Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 31. But I just spoke on going to Puerto Rico for Backlash and just the passion and the happiness and the joy that Puerto Ricans have for wrestling. Similar to everybody. Everybody loves wrestling. And just to go back, when I kind of put into context and realized that, like, yo, this is the first since Pedro Morales. You know,
Mhm.
Carlito didn't get to do it. Some others didn't get the chance to hold a world championship belt. Um, and I just thought about my great aunt, my titi, who passed away, who I used to watch wrestling with, sitting inside of her lap, as a 1-year-old, and kind of being like, no, she's kind of the seed. She kind of planted the seed. Um, so it was cool and it was emotional and it's it's very important. Representation is very important. I'm so happy. I'm so thankful that Bianca Belair and Naomi, Jade Cargill, that they exist. I got to talk to Jade for the first time since she joined the WWE at Media Day, and to look her in the face and tell her, hey, I have a niece, a black girl who loves wrestling, who lives in Harlem, who's in New York, who's 8 years old, who now has these real life superheroes, not at the movies, but on the screen every Friday night. To look at that and to know that she has someone that looks like her, to know that, hey, if this is what you want to do, you can do it. And you could say the same for EO, and some of the cultures that are being represented with the roster, not only in the WWE, but Mustafa Ali and what he's doing for his people and what everyone's doing, and just the different representation is so damn important. And with wrestling being cool again and all this success from the indies to the WWE, to see all these different facets of whatever skin color, sexual orientation, preferences, whatever you want to call it, to see everyone being represented is a beautiful thing, because it is so important to have that and to know that these doors can be open and that you can do these things because you've seen someone who looks like you, that was brought up in the same areas, that looks like you, brought up in the same areas and gone through some of the same things. So it was super important and super cool to kind of ask him, and for him to kind of realize, like, to quickly put into context that, yeah, it's been 50 years since there's been a Puerto Rican world champion. So I'm very thankful and very gracious. And also, on another note too, I'm just fascinated and I love the grind of trying to do anything in life that you aspire to do. Um, there's obviously, life's a roller coaster, right? And you have to take opportunities, and sometimes things don't work out. Um, there was a lot of media there, and there's a lot of people that weren't able to be in that room. And I was like, hey, man, I got denied to cover WrestleMania for 5 straight years. Um, and, Damian Priest kind of mentioned his journey, but not even his whole career journey. If you look back to last year, I thought it was so cool that, no, he didn't get to have a match at WrestleMania. But what happened? He main evented Backlash, which probably had as much hype because of the success that Bad Bunny was having with the album, with him doing Coachella, like getting to main event and doing it in his country. And I was like, yo, that's a testament to patience. And him holding the Money in the Bank for 281 days, something ridiculous. I think it was the longest a Money in the Bank anyone, man or woman, has held it. And for him to have that moment and to see him now, he was just at the Yankees game. He's a huge Yankees fan. Kid grew up in New York, and kind of getting to see that patience be rewarded can be a lesson to everybody. And no matter what you're doing, whether you're trying to be in wrestling media, whether you're trying to aspire to be a manager at your job, or whatever heights or whatever you want to do, that, like, you can do it, and it's going to take some hard work, but if you stick with it, then it can be possible. So it was cool on both of those fronts to be able to ask him that.
Yeah, and especially everyone has those moments where someone represented and having the achievements that they have, especially with what Damian Priest has. And yeah, it was 50 years since someone held that title from Puerto Rico. So imagine the younger kids who are watching, who may have watched the press conference, like, oh my gosh, Damian's my hero now. He's holding this belt. He's holding this belt. He's representing my country really well. And seeing the dreams of so many people that are coming true, I bet that kid, give it a couple of years, and then suddenly, like, he wants to be in a Mania event. And all it takes is probably someone, not probably, definitely someone seeing the success that Damian Priest has, and that kid will probably say, "Hey, I want to be in the ring. I want to have that Mania moment." And seeing that press conference and seeing how much things have paid off in its due time, and having Damian being represented well in Puerto Rico, like seeing how that works it's amazing to see that. So but for me, I'm Filipino. I'm still waiting for that, but we got TJP in New Japan, but he has his own successes there.
Yeah, there it is. Now you guys got Manny Pacquiao. They only let us get one. We can agree on that. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's important. And it was definitely it was a great moment. And it was cool to see because these things are only going to increase, especially with the globalization of the WWE. When you look at the calendar we went to Philly, next time we'll be in the US for a big show is going to be all the way in August, 4 months from now in Cleveland, for SummerSlam, as we go to France and Germany and Scotland and all over Saudi Arabia. So it's cool, man. And very thankful and very humbled that I was able to be in the room and able to ask that question and kick off the press conference with that, because it was important.
Right. And we're going to end our conversation. Oh, first of all, thank you, Adrian, for having you on the podcast. And it's honestly a delight seeing your interviews with a lot of the wrestlers that you have. Shout out to Eddie Kingston, because one of us, New Yorker. So I gotta give my respects to Eddie. But otherwise, like, it's nice to see someone on the other side of things, being a guest and seeing how you're doing on the wrestling media side of things now. And I do want to end my conversations with this. So the World Health Organization listed adolescents between the ages of 10 and 19. Around that time, people grow up within those age ranges and pick things up along the way. Now, if you're in the same room as young Adrian Hernandez at the age of 14, what would you like to give him as advice, or what would you like to talk about?
So kind of just stick to what you enjoy, follow your path, what you trust in and what you like and what you care about. And if you get joy from it, like that's first and foremost, because if you're doing this just because you think it's cool, it's apparent to everyone. If you really love this and you see the passion and the joy and the energy that you put into something, whatever it is, do that. And with that, you will find people that have that similar passion, not even towards the same thing, but have a similar passion to whatever they enjoy and whatever they like. And those are the people that you should be around. And Kendrick Lamar has a song that's basically, the chorus is essentially, "You don't have to lie to kick it," meaning you don't have to act cool to hang around with us. That's kind of what I would do. Just trying to be nice to everybody and not step on toes. And look, if you're in the direction of trying to be great, eventually that's just going to happen, because you're going to be elevating yourself, hopefully. Even if you have well intentions, someone will find something wrong with it. So don't worry about those people. Worry about what you're doing. As long as you know that what you're doing is right and correct, the right people will be along with you. And don't be afraid to support those people either, because that's another thing. Everyone can win in their own way. There's a million different ways to make content or to do things. I just made this like specifically the wrestling media or wrestling in general. But outside of that, like, there's a million ways to get to the top. And there's room for plenty of people. So that's what I would say. Maybe spend too much time trying to make sure you're cool with everyone, when in the end it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's being set apart too. And I noticed that with a lot of content creators, that what sets them apart is what really makes them shine. And even though we have the same outlet in wrestling media, there is always a unique approach with everything. And each of those will work. Some might not work, but at least, like, the point is being drawn across, and whatever content that that we're doing. Like for me, I'm still doing podcasting, I'm doing all these video stuff just so that, hey, I want to take, I take my love for wrestling and getting to conversations with everybody. So there's always a unique approach when that happens. And, if they can succeed in their own way, there it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but otherwise, thank you so much for having you on, Adrian. I have nothing left to give. Where can we find you? And take it away.
You can check it out on YouTube, youtube.com/AdrianCLE93. A lot of people have been checking out the YouTube, and it kind of gets me emotional. So thank you. We have interviews on the way with Shelton Benjamin, Street Profits, Ricochet, Samantha Irvin, Jade Cargill. You just mentioned we just talked to Eddie Kingston. We'll be talking to Dolph Ziggler and Moose in person in studio later this week. Who else did we talk? Roxanne Perez, Trick Williams. I said Jade. I can't even remember all the specifics. Just know that we've talked to a lot of people when it comes to the wrestling world. And we'll be talking to some more too. We got TNA coming to town here in Las Vegas. Following up after that with TNA later this month here in April. In May to kick off the summer, AEW Double or Nothing. So we'll look forward to more interviews with that. We'll be heading to Toronto for Money in the Bank. I'll be headed back home where I'm from, Cleveland, Ohio, for SummerSlam. So we have the blueprint of what's coming up. So go check that out on YouTube at Adrian, youtube.com/AdrianCLE, Instagram at Heavyweight Radio, Twitter, Adrian Radio 93. I apologize that they're not all the same thing. One day we'll get that all together. And you can finally, last thing I'll plug is the Unlikely podcast, Unlikely with Adrian Hernandez. I kind of basically put all the interviews in audio format, so you don't have to go on YouTube. You can just put it wherever you get your podcasts, from Apple to Spotify, Google, SoundCloud, wherever you get it, we're available. Unlikely with Adrian Hernandez. And thank you so much for asking me to be on. I'm appreciative and glad we could talk about WrestleMania.